Moses Malone was sentenced to face the darkest chapter of his legendary career when he was arrested in January 1993 for violating a peace bond obtained by his ex-wife. The three-time MVP who dominated basketball courts for over 2 decades found himself in handcuffs, accused of threatening to kill his former spouse. How did one of basketball's greatest rebounders fall from grace so dramatically? The arrest in Milwaukee shocked the sports world. Alfreda Malone had obtained a peace bond against her ex-husband, and when Moses violated it, the consequences were swift. According to court documents, she alleged that the basketball giant had threatened her life, damaged her property, stalked her, and illegally entered her home. The man known for his quiet demeanor on the court was now facing serious criminal charges. Released on a $5,000 bond, Malone awaited a hearing to determine if a permanent peace bond would be established. This wasn't the image anyone expected from the soft-spoken center, but perhaps the warning signs were always there, hidden beneath years of public misunderstanding and personal struggle. The same obsessive drive that made him great also contained the seeds of his downfall. Moses Malone was born in 1955 in Petersburg, Virginia, a city experiencing severe economic decline. The tobacco trade that once made Petersburg prosperous was dying. The construction of interstate highways in the late 50s bypassed the downtown area completely, devastating local businesses. The middle and upper classes fled, leaving behind what residents called a hardscrabble area where opportunities were practically non-existent. This wasn't just poverty, it was systematic abandonment. Moses grew up in this environment of desperation and decay. His father, an alcoholic, abandoned the family when Moses was just 2 years old. This left his mother, Mary Hudgens Malone, to raise him alone in what could only be described as a shack. Despite having only a 5th-grade education, Mary worked multiple jobs as a nurse's aide and meatpacker, struggling to provide for her son in conditions that would break most people. The weight of her sacrifices would later become both Moses's motivation and his burden. The pressure of this upbringing created something dark within Moses. The desperate need to escape his circumstances wasn't just motivation, it was survival. His mother's relentless work ethic became embedded in his DNA, but so did the fear of returning to poverty. This fear would drive him to extraordinary heights, but it would also make him possessive and controlling in ways that would later destroy his personal relationships. By age 12, Moses was already 6 feet 3 inches tall and dominating local basketball courts. Youth leagues actually had to create special rules forcing him to play guard and stay out of the key because he was too physically dominant. But even his early success carried seeds of future problems. He was isolated by his size, his talent, and increasingly by his personality. Other kids couldn't relate to him, and he began to see himself as fundamentally different from everyone else. This isolation bred a deep mistrust of others. Moses learned early that people either feared him or wanted something from him. He rarely experienced genuine human connection, which would later make it nearly impossible for him to maintain healthy relationships as an adult. In high school, Moses became a phenomenon, but not necessarily in healthy ways. As the 1974 National High School Player of the Year, he led Petersburg High to a 50-game winning streak and back-to-back state championships. His statistics were almost inhuman: 31 points, 26 rebounds, and 10 blocked shots per game. But his dominance came with a cost. He began to see himself as separate from and superior to others. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Moses Malone's complex story, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments what other basketball legends you'd like to see covered next. Over 300 colleges offered him scholarships, but Moses made a decision that revealed his growing arrogance. He declared college basketball too soft for him and became the first modern player to jump directly from high school to the professional leagues, signing with the ABA's Utah Stars in 1974. While financially smart, this move showed a troubling pattern of believing rules didn't apply to him. He even placed a prediction in the family Bible forecasting his professional success, displaying an almost messianic view of his own destiny. His professional career was undeniably successful, but it was built on an aggressive, almost violent style of play. Moses earned the nickname Chairman of the Boards for his rebounding ability, but his methods were concerning. He would physically dominate opponents, often scoring through putbacks after deliberately missing shots to create more rebounding opportunities. His game was based on pure force and intimidation rather than finesse or teamwork. Moses developed a unique and calculated approach to basketball that bordered on psychological warfare. He would tap at missed shots repeatedly, not just to score, but to frustrate opponents and assert his dominance. This tactic lowered his field goal percentage, but dramatically increased his rebounding numbers. It was basketball played as a war of attrition, and Moses always outlasted his opponents through sheer willpower and physical punishment. Despite playing over 1,200 games, Moses was never disqualified, which some praised as discipline, but those who knew him recognized it as calculated control. He knew exactly how far he could push before crossing the line, a skill that unfortunately didn't translate to his personal life. On the court, he could control his aggression. Off the court, that control would eventually slip. The media never understood Moses, partly because he made it impossible for them to do so. A cynical disc jockey in Salt Lake City gave him the cruel nickname Mumbles, mocking his deep southern accent and profound shyness. Moses was so uncomfortable with strangers that reporters often labeled him a dumb jock, but those close to him knew better. His lawyers called him a bright kid, but one who was deeply troubled by his inability to communicate his thoughts and feelings. This communication breakdown became a recurring theme throughout his life. Moses believed that actions spoke louder than words, but this philosophy created dangerous blind spots in his personal relationships. He never learned to express emotions healthily or resolve conflicts through dialogue. Instead, he internalized frustrations until they exploded in destructive ways, including back-to-back honors with the Houston Rockets. But even his greatest triumph carried ominous undertones. He made his famous prediction of sweeping every playoff series by declaring foe, foe, foe. While the 76ers came close to this prediction, losing only one game en route to the championship, Moses' guarantee revealed his need to control outcomes and his belief that his will alone could shape reality. The statistical dominance was undeniable. Moses retired in 1995 as the third leading rebounder in NBA history with over 16,000 boards and the fifth leading scorer with more than 27,000 points. When his ABA and NBA numbers were combined, he ranked ninth all-time in scoring and third in rebounding. He led the league in rebounding 6 times, including a record 5 consecutive seasons from 1981 to 1985. But these numbers masked growing personal problems. Moses held the NBA record for most free throws made with over 8,000, a statistic that reflected his aggressive, confrontational style of play. He lived in the paint, constantly attacking the basket and drawing fouls from defenders. This same confrontational approach would later emerge in his personal relationships with devastating consequences. The warning signs were always there for those paying attention. His extreme introversion, his discomfort with human connection, and his belief that performance was the only thing that mattered created a dangerous mindset. He famously said that great players don't talk about what they'll do, they just do it. But this philosophy extended beyond basketball into areas where communication and emotional intelligence actually mattered. Moses' relationships with teammates were often strained. While he was respected for his work ethic and production, many found him cold and distant. He rarely socialized with other players and kept his personal life completely separate from his professional obligations. This isolation, which he saw as focus, actually prevented him from developing the social skills necessary for maintaining healthy relationships. By the early 1990s, Moses' marriage to Alfreda was deteriorating rapidly. The same obsessive drive and need for control that made him great at basketball became toxic in his personal relationships. The divorce proceedings became increasingly contentious, revealing a side of Moses that shocked those who knew him as a quiet, modest citizen. The January 1993 arrest was the culmination of months of escalating behavior. Alfreda's allegations painted a picture of a man whose inability to handle personal rejection had turned dangerous. The same hands that gently guided basketballs into hoops had allegedly been used to damage property and intimidate the woman he once loved. The man who never lost control on the basketball court had completely lost control of his personal life. What made the situation even more tragic was that Moses seemed genuinely surprised by the consequences. He had spent his entire life believing that his basketball success excused other shortcomings. The revelation that legal and social rules applied to him, just like everyone else, was apparently shocking to a man who had lived by different standards for decades. Moses Malone died in 2015 at age 60, his legacy forever complicated by the contrast between his professional excellence and personal failures. He remains one of the most underrated players in basketball history, but perhaps that's because people instinctively sensed something troubling beneath his quiet exterior. Even his posthumous recognition as a Hall of Famer couldn't erase the shadow cast by his legal troubles and failed relationships. His story serves as a tragic reminder that athletic greatness doesn't automatically translate to human decency. Moses dominated basketball courts for over 2 decades, accumulating wealth, fame, and accolades. But he never learned to navigate the more important game of human relationships. The same obsessive focus that made him unstoppable as a rebounder made him destructive as a husband and potentially dangerous as an ex-spouse. The most heartbreaking aspect of Moses Malone's story might be that it didn't have to end this way. With proper guidance and emotional support, his drive and intelligence could have been channeled into building rather than destroying relationships. Instead, his inability to seek help or admit weakness ultimately overshadowed his remarkable achievements. What do you think about Moses Malone's complicated legacy? Was he a victim of circumstance? circumstances or someone who failed to grow beyond his troubled upbringing? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from basketball history.